This is a very special day. It is the day after St. Patrick's Day, but it's more than that. We're at a moment in time where the pandemic hopefully is under control and that we may be able to see each other. They announced today that here in Nova Scotia, that as of April the 19th, we'll be able to go visit Mary's relatives in New Brunswick or visit PEI because we haven't been out of the province since March 13th last year, and it's time. That same impact has impacted older adults more than any others, and it's made them ready to do the things that need to be done so that they can age in place and stay in their own homes. Yes, we have long term care homes. Yes, there is less of a desire to enter a long term care home today than there has in the past. And at the same time, people want to stay in their homes and age in place. So today's agenda looks like this. Welcome and thank you. We're going to talk a little bit about Aging 2.0 internationally and specifically the work we're doing here in Nova Scotia. We're going to introduce the three presenters. The three presenters, when all is said and done, you'll see that it's not they're talking about the same thing, but they're providing context and weaving into the fabric of what the options and possibilities are. And it's all three of them are good in their presentations, strong in their presentations, have a strong message. And by end of this day, you're going to have a sense of why these three pieces connect. It's important under the Truth and Reconciliation Commission to recognize that we need to acknowledge that we're in Mi'kmaq, the ancestral and unceded territory of the Mi'kmaq people. And may we, and I have to move my screen here, live in peace and friendships with its people. We are able to do this through our volunteers and hard work, but there are some financial components of it. And this is an offspring of the work we did with the two-day conference in October, Innovate Care. And we need to deeply thank the Atlantic Canada Opportunities Agency, the Provincial Department of Seniors, and a ton of private sponsors. Aging 2.0 is a large international not-for-profit that has managed at this point in time to have 140 individual chapters, and they positioned themselves as the leading innovation network for aging and longevity. There is a global community, and they've engaged with some of the major global corporations as they try to figure out how to participate in the opportunities arising from the longevity economy. John Hamblin is a member of the Crossing the Digital Divide topic team, and there are a number of specialty topics that Aging 2.0 is working on. They've issued a white paper. John tells me, and I believe him, that it's a very interesting report. And as we unfold the conversation today, that you'll see that rural internet connections are a huge issue in this part of the world. And when you live in Halifax, which is an urban center with high-speed fiber to the home versus living rurally, it's a very, very different world. So how big is this opportunity? People underestimate, and we as older people, I'm an older person, I'm 71, John's 2 or 3 years older than that. 56 cents of every dollar spent is controlled by folks over the age of 50. That's going to increase to 27.5 trillion with a T by 2050, representing 61% of total spending, and up to 85% of those decisions are made by women. And we don't talk about, approach, or understand what the wishes and desires of the older population is. Dignity, joy, fun, living a productive life, and living where they always were, at home. This is our mission, and John has been the principal architect of the chapter mission here in Halifax, but it's about within Atlantic Canada, not just here in Nova Scotia, is building an age-friendly community where all seniors, irrespective of race, economic level, health, or geographic location, can thrive, flourish, enjoy living their lives to the fullest. The impact of the Living Lab is of two components. There's an economic and social component. We're working with Age Well, who are in the midst, together with MedTech, of rolling out a national network of community living labs and finding the next big opportunity. They're talking gazelles, the unicorns, the very large enterprises, and over a 5-year period, they're intending through the work that's being done to get that to happen. The role of the Living Lab in all of this is providing the space and place where these entrepreneurs, policymakers, and those producing products and services for the longevity economy have a way of actually understanding a day in the life of those they're trying to serve. Core principles: dignity, respect, self-worth. This is a direct quote from Olive Bryanton, who was with us on Monday. Nothing about us without us, older adults leading and involved in every single piece of it. And both a rural and an urban mandate and intergenerational. John has done some very interesting work with Google on social isolation using Google Nest Minis. Major project. They sent a team of 4 to 5 folks from Silicon Valley here to Nova Scotia to collect the evidence to take back to share with their internal folks. In December 8th, we had the lead engineer for Alexa Health talking about the design principles and processes at Amazon. And John is on a first name basis with these folks. We are connected even from here. And when we think intergenerational, we think of older adults needing help opening doors, buying groceries, picking up stuff, etc. The greatest gift you can give an older adult is the ability to help you. And there is if we were in the Indigenous community, elders have a very different place than they do in our society. Elders are the foundation of the culture that passes on the past knowledge about the community to the younger generation. We need to have that, and the Living Lab principles that we want to work from will be working from that basis. Build it and they will come. No, they won't. We're not going to build physical structures. We're going to take what exists now and work not just in Halifax. It's been said many times. Did you know people actually live outside the urban centers? They're out there in rural Nova Scotia, rural PEI, and there's a lot of them. So in order to do that reach, we want to find partners like the Nova Scotia Community College and the library system who have a mandate to do work in the community and leverage their current activities through the work that we want to do. Why do we think this is possible? I'm not going to read the names on the screen, but these are all names of companies that John and I have worked with who came through the system here in Nova Scotia and are world class. We have really bright people. Had the privilege of being at the Revolutionize conference in the fall of 2019 in Boston, and where the governor and the mayor had as a mission to make Boston the Silicon Valley of aging, accessing the opportunities inside the longevity economy. We've had a long-standing tradition since the Halifax explosion of working with Boston. There's no reason we can't bring that same level of expertise here to Nova Scotia or in the Atlantic region, where we can build product, services, and policy that serve the true needs of the older population. That's the mission. One of the activities that we've been working with is the virtual advisors program through Boomers Plus, and the province through the Department of Seniors has provided the funding so that we can assign a very experienced mentor to give you a hand. And this is for organizations to help navigate issues and challenges resulting from COVID, and primarily focused on not-for-profits. This is the definition of what a virtual advisor is. Now, I'm going to sign off here. Our first I turn this over to John, but our first speaker will be Dr. Ian Philp.
Okay. John is here now. You will note that it's my picture and not my face because for some reason my internet has decided to act up. And if you see me in my lovely face in full motion, then I can't hear. Interesting problem for the moment. Uh, I I will start this introduction by saying that how I met Ian in the first place and came in touch with Age Care Technologies. I was working on a project at Northwood with Margaret Zambo at the time, and she had long discussions with Ian and Age Care Technology, and they have brought the ACT assessment test into use within the Northwood community. And at the time, they were just trying out testing it and decided to use me as one of the guinea pigs, I guess you would call it, for the test. So I took the test quite some time ago. At the time, I will say that I was somewhat, very much stressed out and also somewhat, I guess you'd even say depressed. And I didn't quite have a handle on why this was. And after taking the test and looking at the self-assessment, which is really what comes out of it, I realized that all of my anxieties and issues related to my health, as a result of the test, I realized that I had real issues and that my issues revolved around my health and also to do with my weight. And so at that time, I decided in my self-assessment to change my life. And I will stand up for a minute because I'm proud of it, back off a little. And we will see that John Hamlin now weighs 70 pounds less than he did when he took the test. He was on 3 medications a day at the time. And since then, he's got on a healthy diet, lost 70 pounds, exercises regularly, and is taking no medications of any kind and expects to live to be 100. I'm not suggesting that the ACT assessment will alone did that, or that it will do it for others, but it certainly encouraged me to think that this test was a very valid one and valuable one. And I got more involved with Age Care Technology, and I'm working on a smart tech course with them for home care workers, explaining the value of smart tech to seniors. But in any event, Ian was a doctor, is teaching, a long-term professor, founded Age Care Technologies several years ago, and really has, as is expressed on their website, a goal of helping 100 million seniors within the next few years. There is much more to Age Care Technology than that, just the ACT assessment. And I'd really like at this time for Ian to take over and tell us all about what Age Care Technology does.
Thank you, John. And thanks everyone. I'll take about 9 minutes of your time to talk about Age Care Technologies and what we're trying to do. And Ed, thank you as well. And a lot of what we're trying to do is aligned with your missions to promote healthy aging, aging at home, ending loneliness and elevating caregiving. I can relate to all of these subjects as well as crossing the digital divide, which are your special areas. And thank you also to colleagues from Northwood. It's been such a pleasure working with you. I regard myself as an honorary Canadian, having found my adopted family in Vancouver at the age of 40. They could have been anywhere in the world. Like most adopted children, I thought my father might have been the Duke of Edinburgh, but I don't fall into half the world's population who are his progeny. But anyway, that's another story. My interest in older people started as a medical student in 1980. And I came across a wonderful geriatric service and chose to do my first job in medicine in that unit. And one of the less attractive parts of the unit were the long stay wards. because they were slightly depressing places, literally in the bowels of the hospital. And we did our weekly ward round, and the older people there were very quiet. But the doctor before me in the job had learned to drive the hospital bus and took a bunch of old people out to the pub on a Friday night. And he said, would I carry on with that? Which I decided to do. And after I passed the test and we secured a corner of the local pub, that became the Friday night ritual. And I remember one patient in particular, George. He was an ex-miner, coal miner. He'd had a pit accident and he lost his right arm. And then he had a stroke, which affected his left side, leaving him severely disabled and needing long-term hospital care. I'd seen George on the ward rounds every week. He never said a word. But in the pub, after his fifth whiskey, which he drank on a glass on the stump of his right arm with a straw, he regaled us with stories of his life, littered with expletives. But, you know, he came alive. And I learned that, you know, in healthcare for older people, there's more than just medicine. There's more than just nursing. Our role is to enhance lives. And then when I left the job and had tremendous support from Jimmy Williamson, who was the professor there, he told me the great problem that he had identified but not solved, which was that 2/3 of the things that really matter to older people for their health, their independence, and their well-being are not reported, let alone met. And he said, Ian, I want you to solve that problem. And I've spent really 40 years of my life since then trying to solve that problem. And you know, the number one problem in that list is loneliness. Around the world, the number one problem is loneliness, which has such devastating effects for poor mental health and indeed even for mortality. So I want to take you into, I'll try and do a screen share at this point. Okay, is that working?
Yeah, it's working.
Great, it will have
Now
gone.
it's gone.
I was just going, yeah, I'll leave it on the, I'll have to leave it not on full screen. So as John said, our purpose is to significantly improve the lives of 100 million older people by 2030 using a business model that's built on 40 years of research. And we're addressing three interlinked challenges: the unreported needs, which I've mentioned, the lack of recognition of the role of caregivers and the elevation of caregiving to where it should sit in our systems, and the lack of high quality information to help policymakers, commissioners, and providers to address the things that really matter to old people. And the consequences of these problems are a load of human misery, unnecessary pain, suffering, loss of independence for millions of older people, undervalued, frustrated caregivers, unable to deliver the best care they would like to older people, and without adequate information, wasted resources, lack of efficiency and effectiveness in addressing the things which really matter. The aged care technologies proposition starts with some general elements of thought leadership in defining excellence in what compassionate person-centered care for older people looks like and enabling its spread across the world, where we share learning from the great people I work with, including Northwood as a leading provider of compassionate person-centered care. The formal attempts to create a global coalition aligning policymakers, product developers, businesses, commissioners, policymakers, services, practitioners on a combined mission to deliver compassionate person-centered care for old people, and working locally in the sort of coalitions that have been established with Aging 2.0, Living Lab, Northwood, Dalhousie University, and technology providers, Canadian technology providers that I'm privileged to be working with at the moment in providing in our coalition. the aged care technology work, in order for it to be easy to access, easy to use, and easy to scale in multiple countries and geographies around the world, has to be technology enabled. And we've spent the last 2 years trying to perfect our technologies so we can deliver our assessment, our training, and our analytics on platforms that are easy to access, easy to use, and easy to scale. And we monetize the business through charges that relate to the use of the products and the services, but they're not very high. The assessment tool, for example, is about 40 Canadian dollars per year per person for its use. And given that we know it adds on average 1 extra year of quality of life and a saving of about £33,000, which is about, I did the calculation earlier, I think, let me just check, 57,000 Canadian dollars on average in reduced long-term care costs. That's not a bad return on investment for 30 or 40 Canadian dollars a year. The training that's available online, the analytics, where we integrate data from across the world to understand patterns of needs and interventions which work. And we provide some advisory services. I mean, on the advisory service, I'm involved and with colleagues as well, but I'm personally involved as an advisor to the World Health Organization, helping to develop global policies to promote compassionate person-centered care. And I've been involved with advising national and local governments and health services and systems around the world. Our training started with training in the person-centered assessment methodology, but with working with international experts, we've developed now a set of training products that will help caregivers, and that includes family caregivers, paid care workers, and professionals, health and care professionals, to deliver better care for older people, based on 2 core principles: understanding how to deliver care with compassion, and second, understanding complexity, because what people don't recognize is that when you've met one older person, you've met one older person, and older people's needs are incredibly complicated, to do with biological changes, medical conditions, environmental, social factors, and mental state and well-being that come together in a complex equation that means you have to embrace the principles of complexity in order to deliver person-centered, compassionate care. Our analytics offer it includes a global database and also the provision of data to our customers that use our assessment tool. And I think colleagues from Northwood might be able to talk later about how these data were helpful in shaping the development of Northwood services and indeed influencing policy at the state level. We found that there were very high levels of problems relating to mental health and well-being in the population served by Northwood, which allowed the Northwood to start to address these needs. And I wanted to look back to the beginning to the ACT assessment tool as a practical method. And what's key to this is not just assessment, it actually helps mobilize a response using community assets to address the things which really matter to older people: loneliness, pain, need for support and self-care. And depending on the community, we get a different response. Depending on the individual, we get a different priority. Our latest work in the UK established the #1 need in a very poor community of retired older people was actually wanting advice about finances. And by referring older people to advisory services, we liberated a lot of benefits to which they were entitled but not claiming. So it can be a whole range of things using community assets. The method's been substantially validated, and it's been shown to reduce suffering, producing great outcomes for old people, and on average adds 1 extra year of quality of life. Now that also translates into a compression of morbidity of about 1 year, hence the saving in the long-term care costs. And if we achieve our mission to, by 2030, have significantly improved the lives of 100 million older people worldwide, we will, that should translate into a cost saving to the global economy of about 5.7 trillion Canadian dollars. Having established our work in Canada through Northwood, we're really keen to extend our work in Canada, partly because of my personal connection. I would like to work in Canada, partly because I think Canada has progressive culture and politics that really want to put citizen, patient, service user first. And I think this is a great opportunity for us to share what we're doing in partnership with Northwood, and you'll hear from my Northwood colleagues later, an offer which I would like us to be able to extend to benefit other older Canadians. Thank you so much for your attention, and I'll see if I can stop screen sharing and be able to take questions if time allows.
Okay, I don't see any questions at the current time, but I thank you for your presentation, Ian. I'm, as I said at the beginning, I'm kind of somewhat partial. I'm certainly not an impartial observer when it comes to the ACT assessment. What we're going to do now is look at two different sides of the use of the ACT assessment within Northwood. First, we'll hear from Margaret Zabel, who has been involved in a project at Northwood, which I was involved in actually from the beginning, which provides accessibility and assistance in doing day-to-day tasks to people that have severe mobility challenges. And this project involves a variety of different people. It's a fairly major project with certainly some support from Age Well and the government. And Dalhousie University is really chairing the research side. And I won't say any more at this time. I'll just pass it on to Margaret and let her tell you how to use the assessment and how the project is going.
Thank you so much, John. Can you hear me? First of all, yes? Yeah, okay, good. So I'm going to share my screen, and I guess I'm called Ed Leach for today. I guess Ed L. Leach. So here I go. Let's see if we can make this work. Could you let me know if you can see that?
Yeah.
Yes.
We can see it.
Perfect. Okay, so as Ian spoke about earlier, there's a project going on now in Nova Scotia that is co-partnered between Dalhousie University and Northwood. The project is called Living More with Smart Technology, and it's funded by Age Well and also another sponsor that's soon to be announced. And I am the project research coordinator. Susan Kirkland, who many of you will know, is the principal investigator and project lead. So I'm just going to hopefully change. So when we talk about health and well-being, I just wanted to take a few minutes and likely re-echo some of the things that Ian was talking about. So, and also recognizing we have a diverse audience with us today. So when we talk about healthy aging, what we're really talking about is creating an environment and opportunities that enable an older adult to be and do what they value throughout their lives. And I think Ed had talked about that earlier. It's kind of not this magical thing. It's kind of what we're doing, all of us, every day. The second thing is the concept of assistive technology. So the point of assistive technology, and we all use it, is to enhance our autonomy, our ability to make choices, our health and well-being, regardless of our functional ability. And I think I want to talk just a little bit about what functional ability is and break that down, because there's a lot of kind of myths that we're kind of hung up on as a society. So the first is that functional ability isn't about just the person. It isn't about whether you can walk. It's about you, it's about your environment, and it's about how you interact with your environment. So interventions on any of those three angles can make a difference. And oftentimes when we talk about functional ability, we talk about the ability to meet basic needs. So things are, the ability to look after ourselves, wash our face, feed ourselves, but it's also about other aspects of our life that we frequently don't talk about. And Ian again alluded to this earlier. It's about the ability to continue to learn, grow, and make decisions as we grow older. It's about dignity, integrity, freedom, independence. It's about the ability to be mobile and to participate in things. It could be about going to the art gallery. It could be about the ability to manage and maintain relationships. And during COVID, we certainly saw many of the challenges associated with maintaining relationships for older adults be exacerbated. And it's very clearly about the ability to contribute to society, which is what Aging 2.0 is all about. So it's very much about that mentoring piece that Ed talked about earlier, and John, and it's about caring for others. Just because you're disabled doesn't mean that you can't care for others. And I've known many older adults who are central supports to others, regardless of their intrinsic capacity. So I'm going to move on. So when we talk about the digital divide, as again, Ed mentioned earlier, he was talking about internet and the ability to have that in possibly rural locations. And clearly many people have also talked about the cost to access technology, whether that's buying a phone or paying for internet. But then there's other additional pieces that create a digital divide, and that digital divide is widening. So for example, people who live in long-term care or receive home care in the province of Nova Scotia are often aging with impairments that impact their ability to access and use assistive technology. For example, if you don't have great use of your hands, it's very difficult to use a cell phone. So the truth is that older adults who may benefit the most are the same ones who face the most barriers. So in an increasing digital world, these people are at high risk of further disadvantage. And during COVID, we are seeing an increasing digitization of critical basic supports and services, which increasingly puts these individuals at risk. So the challenge that Northwood put forward is really well summed up by Kim Parker, who's a rehabilitation engineer and potentially, a star for many people who work in continuing care across this province, is that Kim is one of the few individuals who can support people to actually use assistive technology now. And that means she builds, and with her team, complex systems that help people live their life. And the problem associated with that is that there's only one of her. And the second thing is it's very costly and it requires a lot of customization, and it also requires follow-up. So the idea that was put forward with the Smart Tech project is that we would do a deep dive into supporting individuals who were challenged with this digital divide, try to see if we could use some smart technology with our partner Novalte, and see if we could improve health and psychosocial outcomes for clients across both institutional and home care settings. So just to sum up what we've said so far is we know that older adults value their autonomy. There's been lots written about that. We know that independence is critical and choice is fundamental. And they're all related to healthy aging. We believe that smart technology has enormous potential to facilitate healthy aging, yet older adults in continuing care, particularly those in institutional settings, are often excluded. So why? Why is that? Well, going back to this whole concept and themes that Ian was bringing forward earlier, assistive technology adoption and sustainability requires a cost-effective, very important, customized solution, but it also requires long-term support and integration with operational systems to be able to work. And for any of you that have worked with smart technology, you would understand that it was developed to work in the home environment, not on an enterprise network, particularly one that has all of the challenges associated with healthcare privacy. So just to reemphasize there's a number of themes that are coming forward here, so that if you want to succeed, you need to take a very person-centered approach. You need to consider inclusivity and diversity of the clientele that you're dealing with. You need engagement of the customer, and that means the older adults and the caregivers that are involved. And you need very much a transdisciplinary engagement focus. For example, you need content and lived experience experts to make something like this succeed. It all goes back to the functionality, and it's tied to the healthy aging framework. And as Ian mentioned, we actually have to embrace the complexity of this situation and this problem. So with the support of our sponsors, we're giving it a shot. So the Smart Tech research objectives are exactly reflective of what I just described. So the first is to understand the lived experience, needs, and desires for independence, autonomy, and well-being among older adults with complex conditions in continuing care. There is an increasing number of these individuals who are actually not aging into impairment, they're aging with impairment. So they may have a disease process, or they may have had an accident or a congenital issue that they are now trying to manage as well as they age, and trying to achieve their goals in the lifestyle that they're looking to pursue. The second thing that we needed to understand is we needed to look to test some of these solutions. Is it actually feasible, and will it work to have a smart tech solution in a continuing care environment that could be individually customized, supported, and continued? And third, we needed to explore how to best incorporate these solutions into continuing care settings in a way that they could be scalable, not just across the province, but across the nation and beyond. And that means that we had to look at how do we adopt this technology and how do we change organizational policies. And I'll give you an example. One of the researchers said the other day, well, what technology policies are currently in place in continuing care? Well, not many to deal with residents, because to date, most residents have struggled to access technology. Some of them have. So this is really the demonstration of a complex intervention, and that's where ACT comes in. So we have built a wraparound smart tech service, which includes smart tech devices and experienced rehab support, and a fair amount of complexity around looking to build networks that work and can be simplified so that they don't add additional burden to the caregivers that are involved. But importantly, we have taken the ACT assessment as a central platform for what we're doing. And we've customized our approach to this person-centered assessment with a goal setting. And when I talk about goal setting, I'm not talking about clinical goal setting here. I'm talking about person-centered goal setting. So for example, the goal could be, I want to be able to be closer to my daughter. And that may mean supporting an individual to learn how to use a video call using a smart device, which again can be quite challenging for someone who's either never been exposed to technology or who lacks or has some type of disability that may challenge their access. So the ACT assessment will actually transcend our current systems in continuing care and provide an opportunity to integrate the more traditional disciplinary focus. It doesn't replace a clinical assessment by any stretch of the imagination, and our OT, who's on the line here today, is working very hard to sort through exactly how that will all come together. So the important thing is, at the end of the day, the ACT assessment will be integrated with care planning systems so that the team is supported, the caregiving team, which traditionally may have been clinical disciplines, but will also be the supports, emotional support systems that that individual deems as relevant to help them achieve their plan. So that could be family, that could be their friends, either within or outside the Northwood community or further. So it's all premised on a participatory and person-centered approach. So we are talking about technology customization, ongoing training and support for these individuals and their caregivers. But importantly, we're talking about a digitally informed, iterative development of this service driven by Northwood clients and Northwood staff. So to that end, we're using a series of tools that we will use to capture, including the ACT assessment, obviously, to capture what clients are seeing on the ground and how they feel over this space of a year. But then also we are setting up a community advisory council that will include other older adults, some who've been involved with Dalhousie and Susan Kirkland on a previous project on research engagement of older adults. So they have some research background, but also others who are interested in supporting and engaging this project as it moves forward. So they will help steer the project outputs to ensure that they are very supportive of the needs of older adults. So we're using a number of different research methods to achieve this. And again, I had mentioned the aged care technology assessment is central. As part of that, we also have a student working with us who I also believe is watching this today, who will be looking at the aged care technology assessment and the validation against some of the scales that we are going to be using. We will be looking at utilization of the devices as we use various different interventions from a rehab perspective. And we will also be looking at an organizational policy and procedures review, because we recognize that this is very innovative and we will need to have the supporting systems in place. We hope to recruit 50 older adults and 20 care staff, and in home care, an additional 25 older adults and 20 informal caregivers, and that is going well thus far. So in summary, I just wanted to very specifically address how the aged care technologies assessment will be used. So it will be used to help research participants specifically define their needs, desires, and priorities. We will then be able to look at those needs, desires, and priorities individually, but also as a group. We can use that information to then translate into practical and personalized care planning goals that integrate into a clinical care plan. And it could be as simple as, I need to get my pants hemmed because it's harder for me to walk. This tool will also provide support to the multidisciplinary care team so that everyone can help focus their energies to help the participant achieve these goals, particularly using assistive smart tech devices. So it could be, I am lonely, as Ian had mentioned earlier, and that was one of the key findings in the original pilot work at Northwood. And so what do you need to do to support you to achieve your happiness? And importantly, we will also use the tool to quantify participants' self-reported well-being, independence, social engagement, and healthy behaviors at 3 points of over a year of data collection. And this will support analysis and evaluation of the smart tech service. And that's the part where we talked about the data-driven transformation. So we're not just building a service based on looking at what's been done in other places, because it hasn't been done in other places. But what we are doing is we are building a service that is incredibly responsive to the individuals and the older adults that are involved. This is research that we hope will make a difference. This is about meaningful engagement of older adults as research partners. It's about co-creation of knowledge through iterative and purposeful collaboration with older adults, and the aged care technology assessment enables that to happen. And is one of the key streams that we'll be using, and continuing care staff, so that they in fact are driving decision-making processes. We believe they actually know what they need, and it's our role to support them to get there. It's also a function of progressive partnerships. We could not do this within the confines of the original healthcare system. We need broad content expertise. So that involves Novalte, for example, and Kim Partner, who are bringing expertise in rehabilitation engineering, informatics, and data analytics. We have Think Research, which is a growing and very strong leader in the field. Continuing care, we have a number of people on the team who have that background. Person-centered care, that is Ian's specialty, as he has demonstrated. Change management. And of course, we have our administrative and system partners that are engaged. And this will help us inform the study design, which it has, the outcome measures that we're targeting, which are we hope will be what we hope, but also we expect that other things will come out of this, and the processes that we use to get there. So I'd like to close by just overviewing some of the partners that are involved. And again, there is an additional sponsor that will be announced soon. So thank you very much. Any questions? And because I can't see the questions at the same time.
Yeah, Margaret, it's Ed Leach here. The other Ed Leach, or the one of many Ed Leach, whatever. So you're actually listening to the people you're trying to help and working with them to get what they want. Do I have that right?
Yes, you do. And in fact, that is the center core of how this research is structured. It is not about coming up with the latest widget. It is not about studying somebody else's practices. It is not about innovation in a straight line. It is about the old-fashioned point of understanding your customer. And our customer in this case is both older adults. It is also their caregivers, and it is also the system in which they live. So we have to understand, first of all, what we're doing, and then we have to figure out a way to make this work for them, because this is, true transdisciplinary research, and it's based on a lot of the work that, again, Susan Kirkland and her team have done previous to this. So it's not a brand new thing, but we're hoping that it will be how we're working is as important as what we're doing, because that's where, for those of you who are not as familiar with AgeWell is a research funder that looks at not just the research itself, but the support of commercialization of partners and technology providers for the benefit of older adults and their well-being. And I think that means that we need to work together to all bring things forward. Any other questions?
It's Rick Emberley here. The focus, as I take from the presentation, is obviously tech oriented.
Yep.
Is there any thought or perspective being brought to the table as it relates to what I'll call the physical environment in which these folks live?
Yes, I'm not exactly sure what you're referring to in terms of the physical environment. Are you referring to how they manage their environment?
No, I'm talking about actually the specifics of that physical environment. When you hear people speak of aging in place, for instance, the living environment that you've experienced for the first, whatever, 50 or 60 or so years of your life might not be particularly compatible to what you actually need or would find comfortable in the back end of your life. I'm just wondering if the research touches on that at all.
So what the research is doing is looking at what people's needs, priorities, and concerns are, first of all, to try to capture a comprehensive view of that with the support of the ACT assessment, because we're not sure that we really have a complete picture of that. We often have a lot of information about older adults, but it's not in detail and it's not from them. And it's often not from those that have the level of frailty that we're describing in the study. So this is an opportunity for them to put their voice forward. The second piece is the current mismatch is somewhat a function. Again, it's that interface between the person's capabilities, their environment, and the interaction between the two. So what we're trying to investigate is if we provide them with an option, so more assistive technologies, does it impact that mismatch? And if so, what is the impact on these individuals' well-being? So for example, they will be able to voice control their beds. They will be able to voice control their media. They will be able to voice control, calling. They will be able to reach out and build their interpersonal agency. We don't know what the results of that will be at this stage. This is not about their homes or communities per se. It's more about the individuals at this stage. Does that answer your question?
Yes, I believe. Thank you.
At this point in time, I just wanted, Ed had mentioned the living lab, and there will be more presentations and initiatives in that area over the next little while. But, from our perspective, there's two key ingredients in the living lab. One is that we will have seniors involved in all aspects of every project, but as well, when we're doing pilots and testing them out, it is our intention to use the ACT assessment as they're using it at Northwood on that project at the beginning, halfway through, and at the end, to truly be able to quantify whether what we're doing makes their life better and easier, which is the goal. I find that there's an awful lot of projects going on out there where the validation is never really reached or never really shown to anyone. That's just my little aside for the moment. I did say we were going to look at different aspects of using the test within Northwood. And we're very fortunate to have Helen Rogers on the call as well. Helen's department uses the ACT assessment on a regular basis, and she's going to just chat a bit about both her experiences with the test and as well her experiences as an assessor with the results of the test. Helen, if you want to unmute yourself and fire away.
Can you hear me okay? Yes, I see a thumbs up. I will take that as okay.
Yeah.
Hi, everybody. My name is Heather. Margaret just did a really good job of describing how the ACT assessment is being used in Northwood's long-term care facility right now. So I'd just like to take a quick minute to highlight how we're actually using the assessment outside of long-term care in our community engagement. So my name is Heather. I am a community programmer and I work with communities with Northwood's Community Recreation and Wellness Program. So this is our community center where we focus on working with older adults who don't live in long-term care, but those folks who live independently in the community, as well as people who live in our retirement living programs. So we have independent living, supportive living, and assisted living programs all in-house here at Northwood Halifax. So in community recreation and wellness, we follow a community center model, and we cater to a membership base of older adults all across the province. And we serve anybody who's 55 to 95. So I don't remember if it was John or Ed who said earlier, if you've met one senior, you've met one senior. And I think our group really, really is a good example of this because we have such a diverse population who access our services. So we have implemented the ACT assessment as a part of our membership process. We complete an ACT assessment upon intake for each new member, and then we provide an opportunity yearly. So annually, everybody can have another ACT assessment taken. They can see their own personal growth. They can see there might be new areas of concern as folks age, or just as the world changes around us, different things pop up in one's life. I really like using this assessment on an individual level. It gives me and my coworkers a chance to connect with every single person who we touch. So before you access any of our services, we can sit to get down together and get to know each other face to face. Face to face is a little questionable these days. I've been doing more and more virtually and over the phone, but so is 2020 and 2021, I guess. We really like to use ACT on the individual level because upon your, upon your first contact with our program, we can go through your assessment and we can identify your needs in that moment. Within the first hour of being a member of our recreation center, we can help you to identify key priorities that you may already know about, you might not really have thought about, or you might not think that anybody cares about. And that goes back to Margaret's, you might need somebody to help you hem your pants so you can get to the dang program. On a higher level, or on our membership level, we're able to look at the data of our whole membership base through the aged care. And we can use it to evaluate the programs that we're offering, identify gaps in services or programming to the clients who we serve. We keep an eye on trends. So for example, we started to roll out these assessments 2 years ago, 2019, and noticed that we really had a need for grief counseling in particular. We found a lot of people were needing support with mental health. A lot of people were suffering bereavement. And we're just now in the process of rolling out our first grief support group here for our members. So we don't have that data captured yet, whether that need is met, but that's how we plan to go forward, is probably by the summer, fall, when we start to do our annual assessments again, we're going to see folks maybe have a need met in grief counseling. That's our hope. It also helps us to identify common barriers to participation, so better understand why folks might not be coming to programs, how we can shape our programming around the folks who we serve. We're trying to capture more and more data this year, especially, so we're working really quickly to go through particularly the folks who live on Halifax campus here at Northwood. Just in the wake of the COVID-19 pandemic, we know that there are changes in seniors' well-being. That is just obvious to all of us. But since the Aged Care Technology Survey is so personalized and is really self-reported evidence, so this is what seniors have to say about themselves. So I think, at least in Nova Scotia, this is going to be the first big aggregate group of data describing seniors' experience with the pandemic, but actually taking their words for it and actually how they would self-identify or self-report their experience, which is going to be very interesting and very useful for us in years to come. Finally, I just wanted to end off with a partnership that we're working on. So we've been working with Dalhousie Medical School, so a different aspect of Dalhousie, with people in the service learning experience. So these are Dalhousie medical students who are completing a community practicum experience where they learn how to really interact with older people. And it's wonderful that they have the aged care technologies assessment to do this, because I think, as Ian said at the very beginning, it's not something that physicians seem to get in their training. These little pieces that you think nobody would care about or nobody would think to ask on a clinical level. Can you brush your hair? Can you brush your teeth? These are all things that are going to look at folks' independence, but wouldn't necessarily be covered in a clinical lens. So we now have will be 4 doctors out working in Nova Scotia or across the country who have been trained to become ACT assessors, who have had the valuable experience of actually sitting down to talk to the seniors and just get a really good in-depth understanding of seniors' unique needs outside of that clinical lens. So we're really proud to be able to provide that. Myself, just to wrap it up, I'm really happy for the opportunity to have been an ACT assessor. I have certainly learned so much from so many different people. Really, I've connected differently with my clients over the last 2 years, year and a half of using this survey. And I can say our relationships are stronger. We have a level of trust that is just wonderful. And all in all, the experience from the folks who I've assessed has been really positive. They really like to receive their score. We go over it together. I'm rambling now, but if anybody has any questions, please let me know. We have had just really positive experience rolling out the aged care technologies assessment. If there's anybody who is really curious about this assessment now and might like the opportunity to go through it themselves, you're very welcome to give me an email. I'd be happy to get you folks set up in our community. I'll put my email up in the chat box after this is done. Thank you, everyone.
Great. Thank you. Thank you, Heather.
Thank you.
That was really just great. I mean, it was actually awe-inspiring. I think your interest, dedication, and how you're using the test is wonderful. And I think really, one of the keys is that through this process, the ACT test and how you use it and operate it, it's really seniors helping themselves, and it's giving them a voice which most questionnaires and doctor's visits and other things don't give them. So in any event, I know we've probably run a little over our time, and we have 2 other great speakers. So I'll pass it off to Ed, who will now move on with the others, and I may be here at the end or not, depending on whether my internet dies completely.
At the beginning, we talked about the interconnectedness between all 3 of these presentations. I wanted to introduce you to Glen Hougan, who is a faculty member in design at the Nova Scotia College of Art and Design, has centered his interest around product services that would better serve older adults, has had the great privilege of working with the Mayo Clinic in Minneapolis, doing some work in their accelerator for a better understanding the health of older adults, and he conducted a storytelling exercise while he was there, where he was looking to understand how it is people get stuff done using unconventional and unusual ways of doing it, otherwise known as hacks. My pleasure to introduce you to Glen Hougan.
Hello, everybody. I'm just going to share my screen here. And Ed, can you let me know if you see myself on there?
You and see the screen.
And lots of stuff there. So my name is Glen Hougan. I teach. I'm an industrial designer, and I teach at NASCED. And actually, I have been looking at design for health and aging, and specifically around design for an aging population. The reason I'm focusing on that is as I get older, I also see products that are just not very well designed for an older population. And there was a real need to look at some of the issues. So I'd done a bunch of research, and some of the research I originally started with, I developed an aging suit. And this was originally done at Loughborough University, but it was a suit you could put on to simulate what it would feel like to be older. And of course, it became my ageist suit because it really just reinforced every negative stereotype about getting older. So I moved on from the suit, but I was really interested in ageism. And I went to the Mayo Clinic, and I was interested in why we don't engage an older population as much, or if they tell us why we're not seeing their input as much. So part of the Mayo Clinic was actually looking at going into people's homes and seeing what they were doing. And it was really around adaptations. So we all know Carl Fredricksen from the movie Up. And of course that has some has a classic adaptation that you would find of balls on the end of assistive devices to help it slide easier. The one on the right, I guess, the white things, is actually my father-in-law, and he had marked up his screen door with correction fluid, because he had actually correction fluid for the typewriter. This was a typewriter correction fluid. So he wouldn't walk into it. And these are all, as a designer, there's these insights into certain things that sometimes seem silly, but always have a really good sort of fundamental design foundation. And I think we've all walked into a screen door in our life. I don't care what age you are. And for some reason, this was a really smart design hack. So I'm interested in these adaptations that people do to make their life easier, and really kind of senior-centered ones that, let me just move this to the next one. Sorry, I'm just trying to move this here. There it is. But I think fundamentally is, even when you look at Carl Fredricksen, there is very much, this man is actually 72, 73, 74. So think of him around my colleague John's age. And I don't see John looking like this. So this has all the very stereotypical elements of an ageist viewpoint of an older population. Out of touch, tweed and things like that. Bow tie, some of them may wear bow ties, but again, it's very much a stereotypical view, an ageist view of that population group. And I always think that we have to be aware of our ageist attitudes. And what's been interesting also is healthcare and healthcare organizations are some of the ageist in the research is showing them quite ageist in terms of that. So it's something that we all have to be aware of. And I won't go too much into it, but it has colored everything. And I do find myself constantly having ageist views. And also, just because you're an older person doesn't mean you don't also have ageist views. So I'm looking at this thing called elder speak. And this is the idea of, you know, how we interact or how we view people. Oh, that's a pretty sweater, isn't it? It's that exaggerated tone. What I'm finding in design is sort of this exaggerated design that we get. And it's these kind of products that might have that whiff of a hospital, or these technologies that are just very large, really kind of, if you want to look at it, really cranky, stupid, and tacky. And somehow it's a reference, there's some semiotics of kind of how we might view this population. And it gets reflected into a lot of these unaesthetic, very, very ungainly, ugly products that we seem to design for them. So I've been really interesting, and I think it's really elder speak and elder design. I'm finding that there's a lot of elder design. And in my experience is when I talk to people to understand really what they want, they don't want this whiff of a hospital. They want something that has more meaning in their life, and that's also very aesthetically pleasing. Because as you get older, it doesn't mean you don't, that somehow you just like bad taste. I don't, again, there's this feeling that we need to start to designing around that. And I've been looking at, where is it here? Oops. Looking at how we view people and how people really are. And I think the idea that Carl Fredrickson is maybe there's a better representation of who this person was in the movie Up. And in reality, probably the person on the right is more a reflection of how people in their 70s might be. They're not wearing tweed, they're out and about, they're just as hip and cool as anybody else. And I think we need to have products reflect it. And I think what's happening is we're just not understanding how this population group lives if we're not part of that population group. So I do a lot of things called contextual design. And I work with a partner where we will go in and just interview people and see how products are being used in their homes. And once you get the contextual and see how things are reflected and how people actually live, you start to design then better products and services and things for them. I'm going to be going through this fairly quick, so we just kind of maybe finish in time here. But when I go in, I look at 4 main areas. Do people know the AEIOU? It's lovely. It's because it's perfect. It's all of your vowels. The idea that you need to understand their environments, who are these users, the objects that they use, the activities, and their interactions that they have. And those are kind of the stepping stones when I go into places. Now, the adaptations originally got started with this company in the States called Herman Miller, and they had developed this system in hospitals. And I'll just show you, I went into a hospital, and this was in Michigan, and started documenting everything, the changes that they were making in the hospital. And out of that, of course, Herman Miller was interested in what are the changes they were making to the systems we sold to them, but what are the opportunities to design it. And in the hospitals, I did not talk to the doctors. I actually talked to the people on the ground floor. And it was the nurses, the staff, the technicians, and going and then shadowing and then observing all their environments. And when you do that, when you actually get into this contextual thing, you start to see things that you don't notice if you're not in the environment. So you start to notice the role of housekeeping in the healthcare system. And in reality, sort of the research started to show that housekeeping, the people that are going into your room and cleaning, are not there to talk about your health. They're there to talk about just everyday things and the value that they had in terms of interacting with the patients was a different level than the doctor or the nurse coming in. And the value in making these people feel comfortable in these environments was key. That was one of the main sort of insights. And I think you get these insights when you start to go into people's homes. So that was the initiation that I started to develop around approach the Mayo Clinic. I said, are you interested in how people are adapting things? Because the Mayo Clinic was interested and they knew that healthcare and aging in place that was going to be in the home. So they were interested in this. Now, I'm not going to talk too much about the Mayo Clinic. It's in Rochester, New York. Very well funded, one of the top hospitals in the world, and they had developed the Center for Innovation, and they were looking at the idea of how do you innovate healthcare, and they had set up the Hale Lab. I'd approached them interestingly for 2 things. I was interested in following up on my Herman Miller work and actually going to people's homes and looking at adaptations, and I actually approached them about looking at ageism within healthcare. Interesting, they did not want to look at ageism in healthcare, so they wanted this. So I was looking specifically for not commercial products, but these do-it-yourself adaptations, because as a designer, it was really interesting in what people were doing to make their life easier. So I was looking at that. And I was looking at these things as a designer of, of things they were putting together to do stuff. And it was really functional items. So at this point, it was not about technology. And this was about 5 or 6 years ago. And I think it was hard to document because they had to document it for me, or I had to document it. So if you're looking at these 3 items and you're looking at showering, can you figure out a product there? 3 items. And I'll show you what people come up with. And what they were doing, it was a functional item to help them wash their hair and scrub their back. So from a design perspective, it's crude, but man, this is some smart thinking. And it seems to be a lot smarter than the products that might be out there. And in fact, the products that are out there are very difficult for even me and you to use. Now, I could not navigate some of those products. So again, it's these user-centered hacks that people do give us insight into some very low-cost, functional things that people are trying to design because they're not seeing it in the products, or the products are too expensive. So from a design perspective, this was gold for me. This was total gold. So I went out and I did 2 things. I went on had people document stuff, or I went on online, and they had to send me images. So I documented it on Pinterest. And if you look up product hacks for seniors, you can find these things on Pinterest. This is not just for aging, but for other things. I then started to look at how do you determine what they are. So I looked at, there was 4 main things happening where people were adapting. They were they were modifying things, so they're changing something to make it better. They're repurposing, they're finding things and converting it. They're inventing things, and also they're signaling. So they're putting on these warning signs. And I looked at this sort of framework within every part of the home and looked at what sort of an adaptation it was. I'll show you some of the results. And I went in, and the results were based on when I went into Charterhouse, which was the Mayo Clinic retirement. And I put the call out saying, I'm looking for an adaptation. And usually it was males that would say, oh, I've got an adaptation I've done, or something kind of interesting. And when I would go into their home, they thought they only had 1, but usually I'd find 10 different things that they had done. So some of what was interesting is you start to see adaptations by caregivers starting to look at things and all of the things people are doing in their home and what we can learn from them. Not necessarily using technology adaptations, because it was hard to take pictures of at that time, but all of these people were using technology, at least had cell phones at this time. And I would say that has only accelerated in the last year or 2. But what they were starting to do is create dignity. So this was he actually created this for other people. It was a bib for a spouse who had dementia, and he found it embarrassing she was wearing this child bib. And he developed something that she could wear around and clip onto just any napkin or serviette that they had. And he was making it for other people. He had actually a production line at home. There was other people with limited mobility, and they're starting to make things. So all of this group of people had specific functions that they were trying to address. There was people that were Mr. Fix-It. And again, I will say that I didn't have too many women coming in, and these, if you noticed, I had about 15. Most of them, of course, were professional white males. So what we're not finding, what I didn't uncover, was people in low income, or people from women, or people of color, or indigenous. So I wasn't getting their voices. So I was getting them very specific professional voices. A lot of older white males like myself who have no problem telling their story. But their story was interesting. You know, what they were doing were these things of, adjusting their mattresses and keeping it up high so they can get up quite easy. All around sort of functional items. Things that were designed for them, an emergency thing that you couldn't use. He was lying in bed. You think he can walk, and there was a cord on it that you had to pull straight. That the only way to do that emergency was pulling it straight down. So again, even the things that we design that we might help them couldn't even be used by them. And this was classic. He had a hard time. This is the technology. He had a hard time keeping his pointer, his cursor on things he was doing. And he had developed a system where he could take it and put it in this black box. And I looked online, and they were selling something that would do the same thing for like $300. And this guy invented it. He had figured it out. So again, these innovations that people are happening. At the end of the day, God, people there was a lot of publicity around it. New York Times reported on it. ARP started to take some of the stuff I was doing about these hacks and started to develop them. The Wall Street Journal started to look at some of these hacks, you know, soap and a rope. The one interesting thing is the Wall Street Journal asked me for the top 10 hacks. And you notice on that article a few years ago, they did 9. They did not take the one that was the best hack that I was seeing, the best adaptation. And it was around people adapting their medication management. And I always think that's a real interesting thing. The kind of goofy ones they liked, but the one that actually was a critique of the system, they were about the hacks they were doing about medication management, they did not put in because it didn't quite, I think it didn't quite fit into a narrative of these other hacks. And so I looked at this and you start to identify why they're doing it, how they're doing it, not necessarily using technology at this point because they wanted control. These were people living at home. They didn't, and you can start to see where it's happening. So out of that, just in finishing off, I developed products based on what people are telling me and what the hacks of what things are happening in their home. They know kind of the solutions, they know the problems. I just listen to them. And then because I have some design skills, try to design things, take it back to them and show them. So this was one of them, the medication management. And this is what kind of came out of it. It was this idea that people wanted some control about certain things. The idea that if you notice on what people were putting elastic bands in homes around their medication management because they were worried about pills falling out. So you design it, the idea of these bands can go on it. And again, these insights are something that are key for me as a designer because I don't know the problems. They do. And all of these are based on information that they gave me or hacks that they had developed. The idea that, you know where this is kept? This is kept in their drawers. They're not keeping it in a medicine cabinet, it's in their kitchen drawers. So you design something that actually can fit in a drawer. And they were putting both types of pills on it. And they had different sizes of pills that need to fill in it. Then it starts to be color coded on the top, where you can have the color for either blue for one person, so they're not mixing their medicines. Then they wanted a case. They wanted something where it's a little bit more dignified, where they can keep all this stuff. They want to go to their grandkids or they want to go to their doctor. They could take something. So all of these ideas, and again, I apologize for kind of quickly going through this, but all of these ideas are just things when I observe people in their environment and watch what they're doing. And I think as designers and or as people, we're trying to solve their problems. And I think that's part of it, but it's also listening to what their actual problems are and seeing how they're solving it, because people are solving their own problems in some ways, in some kind of, and a lot of times, sometimes it's these hacks that happen. And all of the problems that they're trying to solve are all around dignity issues. People want dignity in their life. And I don't care what age you are, whether you're younger or older, people want dignity. And a lot of the products and a lot of the services and even the idea of technology that we're starting to do is not things to enhance that dignity, but to maybe to control them. So I will finish, and I apologize for kind of going through that quick, but I want to quickly kind of, well, I guess we're off track. So, and maybe we won't take questions and I can take it after so we can get the other.
Yeah.
Thank you.
I had the privilege after listening to Glen to learn a whole bunch of things about him that I simply didn't know. I already respected his work, his way of thinking, but now know in a more profound way why that is so. And the message that you're hearing over and over and over again is listen, solve the meaningful problems that matter to people and keep it within the frame of dignity. I'm going to take the time to introduce Tyler Brown, who has spent 4 years working for Efficiency Nova Scotia, has been in working with the office of a local MLA, writing documents, briefing notes, and so on for a couple of years. Has a degree in political science, a family heritage in flooring and flooring installation, has a deep interest and deep personal experience with a relative that he wanted to help, and he started a business to help older adults age better in place. With that being said, I'll stop sharing and put this over to Tyler.
So I am here because I was lucky enough to have the absolute pleasure and sometimes misery of meeting thousands of Nova Scotians in their own homes. The vast majority of them were seniors. And because I was able to have that experience, I was able to gain a unique perspective on what works and what doesn't in trying to administer housing audits and renovations for low-income rural seniors. I learned these lessons most often by taking the time to sit and chat over coffee and tea at their own kitchen tables with these thousands of people after I performed housing audits. And these experiences drilled a few things deep for me, that there's a great benefit in performing individualized assessments, that a unique approach is needed with every individual client, and that there's a great need to help seniors stay in their homes, not just for their own sake, but for the sake of their communities. I was in these thousands of homes because I was an energy auditor for a low-income program that renovated rural homes for better heating efficiency free of charge, which sounds like a scam, which was, fun fact, the reason that most people told us they didn't want to have us come in was that they thought it was a scam. So it was a challenge for us. If you want to just change the slide there, Ed. The program was called RLIP, which is an absolutely awful acronym if I ever saw one. But the program itself was wonderful. It's called Home Warming now, thank God. And it was and is an Efficiency Nova Scotia program designed to insulate and air seal the homes of low-income Nova Scotians if their primary source of heat is electric. And it's all in an effort to lower their personal household heating costs, and as well as reduce the demand for power on the existing grid. So there's a lot of parallels between residential energy efficiency, especially in those early days, to aging in place. And in both cases, the housing situation must be unique to the home. Both require a personalized solution based on the actual on-the-ground situation. And in both cases, there was an early knowledge gap between what the experts knew had to be done and the public's understanding of what could be done. It was something we ran into a lot in that program. I started doing energy audits just as these programs were beginning to take off after the first round of initial funding by the province, and it was the Wild West. Every delivery partner was trying to find out the best way to identify homeowners, to figure out what information would need to be collected in order to conduct the efficiency audits, what the best way to target the greenhouse gas reductions that we needed, what the least cost, trying to draft all of our best practices, processes, how to track it. The list was never ending. And in doing so, I saw it all. Basement rooms so thick with cobwebs, it's an effort to pull them down. Attics filled with treasures, real and imagined. A lot of the things that Glen was talking about, lots and lots of adaptations that were made up. People using 2x4s in order to make a lift seat for their toilet. Like, you saw that quite often. I had to go into their fridge to pull the model numbers. I saw everything in there. So many grow-ops in basements. You wouldn't believe it. I saw elegant rundown mansions and more often trailers with self-constructed rooms made of plywood cut into the original structure. And I met the people who lived inside them. I talked to them, but mostly I listened to them. And all told, I was usually there for about 2 hours, and I got to know these people quite well and really got to see how they were living by being all through their home. You want to go to the next slide there, Ed? In 2013, my aunt lost her leg to cancer. And in the process of renovating her house to accommodate her new wheelchair, I began to look into accessible construction. And then after realizing that no construction companies were specifically targeting aging in place and accessibility renovations, I set out to create a company in that space. I convinced another energy auditor to join me in a partnership. We got certified with a CAP certification in Ohio, and we jumped headlong into aging in place. And I would love to tell you, and it'd be a much better story if we would gone gangbusters and you all knew who I was because I was still doing this, but it was a different time. We faced some serious headwinds. We had a really hard time teaching people what aging in place was. That was our biggest single problem, especially with younger seniors. The business, ultimately, we couldn't get enough traction, so we shut it down a year later and spun it off into a typical home renovation company. And that was 7 years ago. Nova Scotia's seniors certainly haven't gotten any younger, and in the ensuing years, the problem certainly hasn't gotten any smaller. You want to go to the next slide there, Ed? So I'm sure this crowd is aware, renovations for aging in place are specific and targeted. They're designed to make everything as simple as safe as possible for seniors so they can continue to have their own independence, dignity, and autonomy. So however, the housing stock and broadband access of rural Nova Scotia can present particular problems for this process. For example, in northern Cape Breton, if you want to go to the next slide, Ed, by virtue of its roots as a coal mining town, it's filled with what's called company houses. So these are all over Glace Bay, Dominion, Sydney Mines, all the other small Cape Breton mining towns that are all over the place in there. And the company houses in Cape Breton are all a pretty similar layout. They're small, about 700 square feet to 1,200 square feet. They're cramped Gothic style duplexes that were built between 1850 and 1920. So because these have always been low income properties, maintenance has not always been done on schedule, and many are run down, some to the point, as you see here in the picture, that they've torn down one side of it and just put up a partition wall. So inside these houses is extremely tight. The stairways are usually less than 30 inches wide. The typical doorway is only 28 inches wide, which will not fit a wheelchair through. The bathrooms on both the main floor and the upstairs are small and cramped. And these houses are, I would say, 80 to 85% filled with seniors, and most of whom inherited their houses from their parents a long time ago and have never lived anywhere else. To do a renovation in these homes with an eye towards aging would be extremely difficult and cost prohibitive. The cramped nature of the home, the narrow stairs can't be easily modified. There's very little room for a bedroom on the main floor, and the laundry's often downstairs in a packed earth basement down a set of unusually treacherous stairs normally. So next slide there, Ed, please. Houses that present challenges like this are all over rural Nova Scotia, and they're in many different flavors. In the valley and the South Shore, they're filled with old drafty farmhouses and Victorians, and they're full of uneven floorboards and classic clawfoot tubs that are beautiful and charming when they're restored, but they're a constant danger to seniors who've been unable to keep up with the maintenance. The South Shore is its big old rundown houses. You know, it's the same all over. And if you look at the map there, if you want to go to the next slide there, please. If you look at that map, it actually slides very well onto that 70% on the right side there that shows the amount of internet in the rural Nova Scotia. So adding to the rural challenge is the fact that although it's stated that 70% of Nova Scotians have access to broadband internet in 2019, the actual measured speeds of those connections by the CRTC is up to 8 times slower than urban connections. So the number of households connected to broadband is expected to grow quickly in the next few years as the telecoms and the provincial government seek to give greater access to rural communities. But areas of the province still lag behind the rest of the country. Due to a government push, it's expected that 97% of homes will have broadband access by 2022. But that estimate was put up before an unforeseen pandemic, which has really inspired demand for high quality fiber optic cable in the United States. And that's really limited our own ability here in Nova Scotia to get fiber optic cable, which has pushed our own orders back in the queue. So the actual year that the province reaches that 97% will probably be delayed by up to a year beyond 2022, and all said and done could be longer. This matters immensely for the types of technology that seem to be at the bleeding edge of aging in place. So something like an Alexa or another voice activated internet connection virtual assistant needs at least a 512 kilobyte per second internet connection. A dial-up connection hits its theoretical limit at 56 kilobytes, and rural broadband in Nova Scotia is averaging below 400 kilobytes in 2021. So technological solutions become a much harder sell and are much less effective if you can't hook them up to the internet. However, there's a space for internet technology, and the rollout of broadband across rural areas in this province continues to fill in the existing gaps of our internet infrastructure. It's really going to have a spot for a lot of these things we're talking about in the next few years. We have to get there first. The physical housing stock and the lack of broadband present a particular challenge to aging in place. So, however, just because we can't do everything for them doesn't mean we can't do anything. It's important that when we think of the technologies available to add and aging in place, that we don't focus too heavily on technology that is just things with logic boards and silicon chips. Technology, especially in situations where options are as limited as what we saw at Glace Bay there, can be grab bars. It can be widened doorways, and ramps, and anti-slip coatings and coverings on stairs. And to have a big impact, it really doesn't need to be complex. Many of the seniors in rural Nova Scotia do not and never have owned a computer. They do not have internet access, and even if they did, they probably would struggle to afford it, especially in the low-income communities. They will push back against technological solutions, and they will struggle to make them work without training and nudges towards adoptions. And that's a lot to do with what we're talking about the ACT earlier. I think that really will have a place in this sort of program. You want to go to the next slide there, Ed, for me? So a program modeled on RLIP in the implementing housing audits could provide healthcare and tax revenue savings by focusing on the most likely and most easily remedied fixes. So for instance, a program focused on preventing falls by seniors, facilitated by providing housing audits, could significantly cut down the number of seniors entering nursing homes each year. So let's go after that low-hanging fruit, like especially for these seniors that are the most vulnerable, the low-income spectrum in rural Nova Scotia. So by focusing our dollars and attention on small, cheaply fixed, and easily installed modifications to seniors' homes, we could help to affect the overall picture and the number of seniors that are forced into care homes immensely. A focus solely on preventing falls could help lower the average annual rate of falls, which is raised every year since 2003. According to all this information is coming from the Seniors Fall Guide that was put out in 2013. And according to that fall guide, the seniors aged 84 to 89 are at the highest risk group for falls, and they're going to require medical intervention, with approximately 1 in 10 reporting a fall annually. Now that number of falls reduces as you go down in age, of course, until it gets to about 65 to 69-year-olds are reporting a 1 in 20 having a fall that requires hospitalization every year. So falls are the highest reported cause of emergency room visits for seniors, and they make up just under half of all ER visits and over 85% of all extended hospital stays for seniors. And when they do end up in hospital, they stay an average of 20 days. Females are about 25% more likely to fall than males, which I'm sure has to do with the fact that the females are living longer than the male. And the falls happened all over, but 50% of falls were reported to have happened at home. So, and low-income seniors were found to be between 2 and 3 times as likely to have a fall than their higher income counterparts. So that's another thing to look at, that the reasons for that would be very interesting to know. I have a few guesses, but I don't have anything qualitative to back it up. Next slide there, please, Ed. So what does this all tell us? The main takeaway from this should be that preventing falls, we can not only help seniors stay in their homes as long as possible, we can also help save the healthcare system an extraordinary amount of money by investing in fall prevention. A program modeled on the success of the efficiency of Nova Scotia's community interventions could save the provincial government tens of millions of dollars for only a fraction of that amount. By creating a program that could effectively lower the risks, we could drastically reduce the chances of a critical fall that begins the downward spiral that leads to nursing homes. The model would begin with an initial assessment performed by an employee well-trained in identifying and applying the basics of aging in place renovations. Ideally, now with having seen this stuff to do with the ACT, I'd love to bring that on board with that too. And we could use these housing assessments to do a basic technology assessment. Is there a fit between this home and a more high-tech solution? Do they have the things that they would need to be able to install that stuff? And would these particular seniors be motivated and able to adopt these technologies? Are there financial and hardware concerns? Can they afford internet? By restricting the program to just the absolute basics, for example, just shower grab bars, elevated toilet seats, an environmental assessment for obvious tripping hazards, lighting upgrades, anti-slip treads, the cost could be kept really, really low and provide maximum benefit to seniors themselves. It's great if they have $150,000 worth of technology in their house, but if one fall is going to push them out of their house, it doesn't really seem worth it. So by focusing the program on low-income seniors, we can not only protect the most vulnerable group, we can target the savings to government, and as the province provides grants and top-ups for seniors who need the space in a full-time care home, but are not financially available to afford the costs. By keeping those seniors who wish to stay in their homes, we can provide a rare win-win for both the seniors and our healthcare dollars. So that's it for me, Ed. Are there any questions?
So with the time that we're at, Tyler, I'm going to hold off on the questions.
No problem. That makes sense.
Use this as wrap-up time. And I'm going to go back to your very first slide. Perfect is the enemy of good. And John, I want to make sure you get a chance to chime in as well. God damn, somebody should do something about these things. Do you know who is? We are. And I don't mean John and I mean, or the presenters. We as a community must take action. The way we plan to facilitate, animate action is the living lab concept. The 3 speakers who spoke today had powerful things to say, and what made me smile a ton, was they were learning from each other. It wasn't that these 3 presentations stood on their own. There was synergy among them, and you were talking to people who know how to, you were listening to people who know how to make things happen. And I'm going to stop there, John. I do have one last slide to show in a sec about Aging 2.0 Halifax, but I want to turn this over to you.
Well, this session has gone on a little longer than originally planned. I think it was very worthwhile. I took down some notes. I have some new ideas and initiatives. I think certainly what was stressed throughout in terms of the ACT test and the hacking and as well the talk about aging well in your home and modifying the home. The key in all of these, which is often missed, is that the seniors have to be involved from day one, and it has to be customized to what they need. We have all kinds of initiatives that are undertaken that say, gee, I think seniors should have this, let's go give it to them. The fact is that, and you know, this is leading back to what we're saying about the living lab and the approaches, is seniors need to be involved at every aspect, and we need to evaluate the results of what we're doing, not just go out with blanket programs. I've enjoyed today's session. I thank the speakers immensely, all of them. It was great to hear how the ACT is used within Northwood and to hear about the many opportunities that hacks provide to developing better products for seniors was phenomenal. And certainly the idea of undertaking a home improvement, let us say, and I mean improvement in the most health safety way for low-income people would save a ton of money in the long run for the government and would allow the seniors to age in their homes. That's it for me.
I'm fiddling around here in the background, but here's the deal. I have one last slide to share. When I saw Glen show his Pinterest slide, this is more than technology. It's more than telling people what to do or how they should live their lives. That's just not going to work. People want to have control, and we have the ability together to build a community that moves past, oh, I hear you, gonna do something. What are you doing now? When we heard Ian talk about isolation being one of the key elements, finding one's own sense of community, like 5, 6, 10, 20, 100 people, whatever it is, who want to work on the same things and have similar interests. And as the bonus, they're working together to share the best ways to get what they want in their lives as they age. What a wonderful thought. Big, ambitious thing to do. If you want to be part of this, I've just put up the Aging 2.0 generic overarching international website, but the Halifax chapter, reach out to us. Be pleased to have you on board. Thank you for listening today. This has been awesome. And John.
Yeah, I just wanted to say one more thing, because some people weren't able to stay for the whole call, and some people are interested in reviewing what we did. As we said at the beginning, when there were very few people signed on, we have been recording the call over the next few days. It will be beautifully edited and set up. And once that is available, we will send the link to the people who were here so that they can look it over again, any particular section they want to, and have it for posterity.
All right. On that posterior note, we'll say goodbye. Thank you to everybody, especially the presenters.